Good evening, everyone, and welcome along to this public lecture. My name is Dr. Emily Brunston, and I am an astronomer in the Department of Physics at the University of York. And it is my pleasure to be here today to introduce our guest speaker, Nic Bonne. Now, a few things, first of all, to get us started. First of all, welcome to this public lecture. It's part of the University of York Autumn Lecture Series and, of course, York Disability Week as well. So getting underway, it's a great pleasure for me to introduce Nic Bonne. I've been able to have the pleasure of working with Nic over the last few years in various projects in accessible astronomy. So Nic is a Australian by origins, and he's a visually impaired astronomer and science communicator. He is the Public Engagement and Outreach Fellow at the University of Portsmouth, and he is the lead on the Science Technologies Facilities Council project, which is called Tactile Universe. And this is the project that we've been able to engage with from the University of York as well. I think overall, Nic is just a great champion of accessibility in science, and I hope you join me in welcoming him to give this wonderful talk tonight.
Okay, so good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for coming and listening to this talk this evening. So as Emily said, I'm here to talk to you about the Tactile Universe project, but also to put that project into context based on how I grew up as a visually impaired person with a really keen interest in astrophysics and astronomy. Okay, so this is a pretty obvious statement, but it's worth saying because it sort of underpins everything that I'm going to talk about over the next 45 minutes. And that is that astronomy is traditionally a really, really visual subject. It's a visual science. The way we teach it, the way we promote it, the way we get people enthusiastic about space, all of that is traditionally really, really visual. We're used to sort of looking at beautiful pictures of galaxies and planets and things like that. And oddly enough, even though I'm a visually impaired person, it was images like that that actually got me interested in space in the first place. But because astronomy is such a visual subject, it can be really, really hard for people with low vision or no vision to actually get interested in astronomy in the first place, to appreciate it the same way that people who can see those beautiful images can. So a little bit about me. So as Emily said, I'm an astronomer and a science communicator. I have a PhD that focuses on galaxy populations in our part of the universe. So galaxies that are relatively nearby in terms of the overall size of the universe. And I'll talk about that a little bit later on. Of course, what makes me a little bit unusual is the fact that I'm also visually impaired. And you probably don't hear about visually impaired astronomers that often. The reason for that is that there aren't that many of us out there. It really is a very difficult subject for people to get into and to have a profession in if they have poor vision like myself. So to explain how I got interested in astronomy in the first place, I really need to go back to the beginning. And that would be me at the age of 5. So I've got a picture up here. I've got frizzy blonde hair, glasses that are so thick that they're sort of like the bottom of soda bottles. And I'm wearing a t-shirt that says I'm a kinder kid. So in Australia, we call sort of prep school, I guess, the kind of thing you'd go to before you start your regular primary school. We call it kindergarten. So this was when I was at kindergarten. So I grew up in rural Australia, in the southeastern corner of the country, where there's a fair bit of green, which is unusual compared to the rest of Australia, but also access to some really, really beautiful dark night skies. So really easy to get out, drive for maybe half an hour and just get a beautiful, beautiful sense, I guess, of the wonder of the universe. Having said that, though, being a visually impaired kid, it wasn't always easy for me to see what was up in the night sky. So I could see the brightest stars if I sort of stood there for long enough and let my eyes adjust to the darkness. If the moon was full, I could definitely see that the moon was there. Couldn't really see much in the way of details, but it was still enough to sort of get me really interested. So a little bit more about me, I guess. So I've been a visually impaired person since birth. So I was born 3 months premature. My major eye condition is one that's called retinopathy of prematurity. So what that means is basically because I was born 3 months early, my lungs hadn't developed and my eyes hadn't developed, and other bits of me also hadn't really finished developing. I was pretty early. And so to keep me alive, to make sure that I could breathe, to make sure that I could survive, I was put inside a humidicrib with a really, really oxygen-rich atmosphere. The biggest issue with that, though, is that oxygen has some really, really funny effects on blood vessels, especially a really strong sort of mix of oxygen. And so as my eyes developed, as my lungs developed, the blood vessels sort of at the backs of my eyes basically grew too quickly. And they did some pretty nasty things to the retina, which is the bit at the very back of the eye. It's sort of a mat of cells and receptors that basically takes the light that comes in through the front of our eyes, receives it. So a little bit like the cell in a camera that does exactly that, so that you can take pictures using a camera. The retina then sort of, I guess, gives all of that visual information to the optic nerve that goes back into the brain, and then our brain turns that into the image that we see. So in my case, you can sort of imagine that a lot of bits of my retina are in the wrong place, or the cells don't work properly. So they're basically being so badly damaged by that oxygen that they don't work. So what I get is a really reduced picture of the world. I can still see a little bit, but I can't see very much past my nose. So my vision's really, really short range. And things have to be pretty high contrast. So I have to have really, really good difference between, I guess, text and background, or the thing that I'm trying to see in the background behind it. So yeah, obviously this is something that I've had for a long time. I've had a lot of time to get used to it. So it's not something that I really think about that much. It's just the way that things work for me. But even though I had that visual impairment, even though it was sort of difficult for me to look up and see the night sky like a lot of my friends, like my family, it's still something that really, really interested me. And even from quite a young age, so from about the age of 5, and in the next slide, I'll talk about exactly what got me hooked on space, I knew I wanted to be an astronomer. And in a lot of ways, I was lucky because nobody ever said that I couldn't be an astronomer or that I shouldn't be an astronomer because of my low vision. And so I just kind of went ahead and did it, and people were generally quite supportive. And so the image in particular that really grabbed my attention, that made me sort of realize that space was cool and that it was something that I wanted to pursue, is the one that I've got up here on the left-hand side. So this is an image taken by the Voyager 2 space probe that was sent out by NASA. In 1989, this went past Neptune, which is the last planet in our solar system. So before we start hitting dwarf planets like Pluto and all the other stuff out in the Kuiper Belt. But Neptune is this beautiful, deep blue, sort of banded, it almost looks like a blue version of Jupiter. So it's got these big, long sort of bands of cloud that stretch all the way around. It's got these massive cyclonic storms, sort of like Jupiter's red spot. And it's just this amazing, amazing striking shade of blue. It just looks cool, if that makes any sense. It looks cold. It's got that, just that feeling about it. But I remember as a little kid, having my nose just glued to the TV screen, trying to see every little detail of this beautiful image of this planet that was so, so, so far away. And seeing that image got my brain going and got me thinking about, oh, okay, so they've just talked about how far Neptune is. What about everything else? What about all that blackness beyond Neptune? What's there? What else could actually be in the universe? And so I knew from that moment on that I wanted to be an astronomer. Astronomy was something that I thought was really, really cool and that I wanted to try and do as a job when I got older. Okay. So it wasn't always easy to learn about astronomy growing up. So there weren't a lot in the way of accessible tools that I could actually use to sort of learn about that really, really visual stuff that sometimes I was missing out on. So I guess I did my best. I had a lot of help from my parents and my teachers. They were all incredibly supportive. No one ever said, why are you doing this? This is too difficult. They always found a way to sort of help me. Even though I might be able to call myself a doctor now, so I've done my PhD, I'm officially a professional astronomer, it wasn't necessarily a direct route. So I actually had 2 shots at a PhD before I managed to finish. First PhD, I actually quit after 2.5 years because I was really, really struggling doing the work that I needed to do. And I was being stubborn. I wasn't asking for help. And so I ended up having a really bad sort of bout of anxiety and depression. And it took me a good couple of years stepping away from astronomy, actually thinking that it was something that I was never going to do, to finally get another opportunity to come back and to have another shot. And so the second time around, I finished. I was a lot more sensible about asking for help. And I also started to think about ways that I could make things easier for me as somebody with low vision. And so my PhD work this time around, the second time, mostly used numbers, so large data sets. So my work, at least for the first year, was basically collecting all of the information that I could about 13,000 galaxies that were nearby to us in the universe. And so galaxies are pretty complicated things. And when I say collecting information, what I mean is I'd collect information on the sizes of these objects, the shapes, so whether they had spiral structures or whether they were elliptical galaxies and shaped a little bit more like footballs or rugby balls. There was also a lot of other really complicated information as well, but luckily almost everything could be represented by numbers. And so for me, it was just a matter of learning how to code, learning how to write computer code, and sort of organizing that data in such a way that I could use it. But one of the problems, I guess, is that in astronomy and in almost any science, we like plots. So we present a lot of our data in the form of plots because it's just a good way of getting information across without using a whole lot of words. And I've got an example of one of the plots from my PhD thesis on the left. Now, I should add, my thesis was really, really long. The reason it was long was because it had lots of plots like this. This is not a small plot. There's a lot of information contained in here. What this plot's showing us isn't really important in this case. What I want to do is highlight some of the changes that I made to this to make this easier for me to read. And I think as an extension of that, easier for other people to read as well. So if you can see this plot, what you'll probably notice is the text is really, really big. So all of my axis labels are huge. I've used bold text. I've made sure that the ticks on my axes are really, really sort of easy to spot. All my axis labels are also really, really big. And funnily enough, I didn't actually do this to start off with. I used to make plots with really small images, really small text sizes. They're actually quite difficult for me to see. The reason I did that was because it was what everyone else was doing. It actually took one of my colleagues that I was writing a paper with pulling me aside and going, Nick, can you actually see the plots that you're making? Because I'm having trouble reading them, so you must be having a whole lot of trouble. And that actually got me thinking and started me, I guess, on the road to making things a little bit more accessible for me, but also making things more accessible for everyone else as well. One of the other things I've done with this plot as well is I've very deliberately chosen different shaped symbols because I've got 4 or 5 different data sets in this plot from memory. I've chosen different colors for each of these data sets, but I've also chosen very distinct symbols. So it's really easy, just even if you have low vision, to work out which bit of data is telling you what in this plot as well. So we could make this black and white and it would still stand out. It would still be really obvious what's going on in this plot. And so this is the kind of thing that I started thinking about during my PhD, the kind of stuff that would make my life easier, but also the kind of stuff that might make people with low vision like me be able to get into this kind of sort of side of astronomy a little bit more as well. Okay. One thing that I did find a little bit more difficult in my PhD was actually looking at images of galaxies. And so on the left-hand side here, I've got 4 images of galaxies, and these are actually real galaxies that were part of my sample. These were images that I brought up because they had slightly confusing data associated with them. The data was saying one thing, but the images clearly look like something completely different. Now, to me, these images are not particularly clear. It's really, really hard to tell whether there's any kind of structure in these images of galaxies, whether these galaxies have spiral arms or whether they're just little blue blobs. So when it came to actually relying on images, I still had issues. I still had to sort of bring these images up on my screen, spend way too long staring at them and not really being able to work out what was going on, and then eventually caving in and asking for help and getting one of my office mates to sort of tell me what was going on. And so not being able to do things for myself, being a stubborn person, it sort of rubbed me up the wrong way, I suppose. And so again, this got me thinking a little bit more about what I could do to make this side of astronomy, so the really, really visual side, a little bit easier, a little bit more accessible for people like me. Okay. And this leads into basically what I did the second I got my PhD. So at this point, I did 6 months of research. I did very similar stuff to what I'd done during my PhD, but all of that stuff about accessibility, all of those thoughts about what could make things clearer, what could make things easier for people with low vision or no vision was sort of bouncing around in my head. And that's where the Tactile Universe project comes in. So the Tactile Universe project started back in 2016. It uses tactile representations of data to make topics in astrophysics research accessible to blind and visually impaired people, particularly school-age students. And the main sort of aims, the things that we really wanted to focus on here was that we wanted to build science capital and the inspirations of VI students from a young age. The reason we want to aim at kids when they're a little bit younger is because when you're young is really when you start to decide what you want to do. It's where societal pressures will sometimes start to change your idea of what you want to be. Say your parents disagree with what you want to do, or your friends think that what you're interested in is a bit nerdy, or your teachers are really passionate about something and they emphasize that without really meaning to. And so you think that that's cool, even though maybe you thought something else was cool to begin with. So engaging students when they're young is actually really, really important because you can start to sort of instill ideas about things like science and how important science is to community and to the human race in general. And so I also mentioned something called science capital. So we want to build science capital in students. And what science capital is it's the sum of a person's science-related knowledge, attitudes, experiences, and resources. And you can imagine that people from different backgrounds will have different levels of science capital. Having parents who are interested in science, for example, will often mean that kids will have a much higher science capital. There's an awful lot of stuff that can influence that. One thing that can really influence science capital at a young age is having a strong role model. So being able to look at examples of people who are older but similar to you and being able to say, hey, these people are doing this thing, and that means that I can do this thing too. Okay. So another way we're sort of aiming, I guess, to make a difference, or we set out to make a difference with the Tactile Universe, is that we wanted to look at as many multisensory resources as we possibly could. So obviously our main focus is on tactile, but we can also start looking at things like sound. So turning data into sound, turning astronomical data into noises that can be listened to. What we can also start to do is combine those things. So for people with a little bit of vision like myself, we can create resources that will work as a combination of tactile and visual, or as a combination of tactile and audio, or as a combination of all three. So basically giving people a chance to access information in whatever mode they want to. So whether it be tactile, audio, visual. I've even seen people do stuff with smell, and that's a whole other topic. But yeah, there's basically giving people a choice means that they can choose the method that's going to work for them. If we were doing this in a bubble, we wouldn't be making anywhere near as much progress as we are. So as well as developing all this stuff, we want to start trying to change the attitudes of other science communicators and other researchers in astronomy, particularly in the UK, but also overseas. So we've been doing a lot of work to sort of get the word out about the stuff that we're doing, but also to demonstrate how useful our mode of teaching is. And how great it can be for anybody, not just people with visual impairments or people who need to learn tactily or through audio means. And so, yeah, that's sort of the last point that I've got in this slide, is that we really want to show that accessibility helps everybody. So if you can make something accessible for a particular group of people, you're almost always going to be making it more accessible for absolutely everybody. So we're doing a lot of work to sort of get that point across as well. Okay. So up here on the screen, I've got a picture of a galaxy. So it's Messier 51. It's also known as the Whirlpool Galaxy. It's actually two galaxies that are interacting with each other. So on the left-hand side of the screen, we have a beautiful sort of face-on spiral galaxy. So when I say face-on, if you imagine that I was holding a dinner plate, it'd be like looking down that dinner plate so that I see a circle. If we ever say a galaxy's edge on, that means it'd be like we tipped our dinner plate onto its side and we were just seeing a thin line. So in this case, this is a beautiful face-on galaxy. We can see its central bulge. We can see its spiral arms sort of winding out from that central bit. And then at the end of one of those spiral arms, there's a second galaxy, and that galaxy is actually being consumed by this much larger galaxy. So it's having all of its stars and gas and dust sort of stripped away. And so even though I've described this image to you, so there's a lot of detail in this image. This is an image taken by the Hubble Space Telescope. It's one of the most detailed images of a galaxy that exists, I think, at the moment. There's just a ridiculous amount of detail. It can be really hard to describe this just using words. And so this is where our ideas for making images like this tactile sort of came from. So we wanted to try and work out how we could make this sort of breathtaking image, something like this, that inspires awe and wonder in people when they look at it. How can we make that accessible to people who can't see so well? Okay, so the basic idea that we came up with was to take a regular black and white image and to turn it into a tactile model using a combination of computer software and 3D printer. And so the way these images work is the brighter the pixel in each image, so the brighter the feature, the more that would stand out. So you can think of it almost like we're giving each pixel its own height. We're raising pixels up. And so if an image is really, if a pixel is really bright, it raises up from the background. If it's really black, it'll stay pretty much flush with the background, so it'll feel really flat. And if it's any shade of gray in between, it'll be sort of a corresponding height in between that maximum white height and that lower sort of background black. And what this results in is basically a tactile image. So we can run our fingers across this and we can feel the structure in this galaxy sort of gradually rising and falling. So we can feel those spiral arms popping out of the image. We can feel the bulge in the middle standing out, and we can feel that that's the particular shape that it is. We can trace that spiral arm all the way off to the side and find that companion galaxy that's being consumed. We can even feel, once we get good enough at actually interpreting these images, the dust lanes that are visible in the image of this galaxy that sort of travel, that are, I guess, situated right in the middle of these spiral arms. So we can feel details like that. And we can start to get a sense of just how magnificent this object is. And so this is the basic idea that was the beginning of the tactile universe. So when we came up with this idea, we knew we had something really, really special, but we also realized very quickly that just because something worked for me as a visually impaired person definitely didn't mean that it was going to work for everyone else with a visual impairment. So like any kind of disability, everybody with that disability is going to be an individual. They will have worked out individual ways of getting around what they might not have and functioning just like everyone else. So the way that I've worked out how to get around not having very much vision is going to be totally different from pretty much everyone else that I could talk to who also has a visual impairment. So we decided that to make our models better, to make sure that they were going to work with as many people as possible, we needed to go out and talk to the vision impaired community. We needed to get feedback from as many people as we possibly could. And so what I have here is an image of us working with some of the local vision impaired people in Portsmouth. This is in the early stages of the Tactile Universe project when we were still piloting things. We basically made a whole lot of different tactile images of different kinds of galaxies. We wanted to sort of talk to people about what made galaxies the shape that they were, why some of them look like footballs, why some of them look like discs with spiral arms. And we got a whole lot of people together. We asked them all kinds of questions. We asked for their feedback. We got them to throw ideas our way as to what could make these images better, what would work for them, basically. And we sort of tried to settle on the most common threads, the things that a lot of people said, or the ideas that we thought were going to be really, really helpful. So I think what makes this project really special is it's not just our idea. We've actually worked with the community that we're trying to pitch this to make sure that what we're creating works for people with a visual impairment. So we're using a process that's called user-centered design. We're not just developing something and throwing it out there and hoping it works. We're actually using that community to make sure that this works as well as it possibly can. And so as a result of that, we have these wonderful tactile images of galaxies. And so these have come a long way since that first purple prototype that I showed you at the start. So that one didn't have any edges. So you'll notice on the left-hand side, there's an image here of a tactile galaxy image that we've 3D printed. It has raised edges around the edge, so it's sort of got a border. the way this border works is that it's actually the same height as the brightest feature in the galaxy. So you can almost think of it as a yardstick or a way of measuring how bright the feature that you're touching on the galaxy is compared to the brightest. So you can sort of bridge your hand between the edge and the tactile features, and you can say, oh, okay, so this is kind of middle brightness. Oh, but this bit's really, really bright. So it's just to help people navigate these images a little bit better, because it does take a little bit of time to get used to actually interpreting these and feeling all the details. The other thing too, so on the right-hand side, what we'd originally done is we'd really focused on tactile stuff. We had produced our tactile images, and we thought that that was all we were going to get people to use. When we started working with the visually impaired community, people said things to us, and in hindsight, this makes perfect sense. They said, but I've got a little bit of vision. Can't you give me an image that I can look at while I'm touching this so that I can use my sight as well as my sense of touch? And so on the right-hand side here, I've got one of our galaxy models. And if we flip that over, we've actually mirrored the telescope image that we used to make that tactile image. And so the idea is that if you want to use your eyes as well as your fingertips to learn about galaxies, you can look at the backside of this image and you can touch the tactile features on the other side that are mirrored. So you're basically going to be touching what you're seeing. And so that just gives people a little bit more flexibility. That it gives them the ability to use whatever they have at their disposal to learn. So they don't just have to focus on using their eyes or using their fingertips. They can use both. Okay. So we realized pretty early on as well, we actually started off working with much older visually impaired people. We had some issues though. So in a lot of cases, people had been told their entire lives that astronomy was something that they were never going to be able to do. And it was something that they shouldn't bother with. And that way of thinking was so ingrained in a lot of the sort of pension age people that we started off working with, that it could be quite difficult to actually engage sometimes. So we had a few people who were really, really, really enthusiastic and who wanted to sort of push past that almost ingrained way of thinking and learn as much as they could. But we also had some relatively negative experience as well. We came across people who just flat out said, no, I don't want to learn about this. It's going to be too hard. Nothing you say will convince me. And that's fine. Because not everybody wants to learn about astronomy. And I think as a science communicator, I can forget that sometimes. It can be really easy to just assume that everybody is super keen about astronomy. And so we realized quite quickly that shifting to primary school age and sort of lower high school age students was going to be much more effective, that we were going to get much better feedback, much better engagement, and that we were going to reach more people by working with that particular age group. That doesn't mean that we don't work with older visually impaired people. We still go out to the community, we run events with people, we get as many interested as we can. But yeah, we decided to focus on younger people just because we thought we could start to make a little bit of a difference in the way that they perceive STEM subjects and physics and astronomy in general. And so what we've actually done is, as well as creating a set of galaxy images, so tactile galaxy images, that sort of tell a story about galaxy evolution, so how galaxies change over time, what makes galaxies the shape that they are, how different galaxies compare to our own Milky Way galaxy. We've also written a whole lot of inclusive workshops that go along with those. So basically the idea is we can train people, we can give them these workshops, and then they can run these for their local vision impaired student groups so that people can start to learn about astronomy and get enthusiastic. We've also tried to provide as much supporting documentation as we can because there can be a lot of variability in how this stuff gets delivered, how it works, the kinds of questions that people ask, and the kinds of problems that people can have. And so we want to try and make sure that we've given as much of the knowledge that we've collected along the way to everybody who wants to use these resources. And so right now we have 20 different groups spread across the UK who have our resources, who were in the process of starting to engage their local communities with these resources, and then coronavirus happened. So a lot of that's been put on hold. But obviously we have opportunities like this talk today where I get to talk to you about the work that we're doing and why it's important. But so hopefully once people can be face-to-face again, once people can get together in groups and touch our models without it being dangerous, hopefully this will pick up again and kids across the UK will be able to learn about astronomy and be inspired. Okay, and here I've just got some images. So on the left is my colleague Jen, who is the Outreach and Public Engagement Manager in my department at the University of Portsmouth. And she is working with a totally blind student. So this student in particular gave us some really, really awesome feedback that actually helped us develop our lesson plans. So he made sure that the language that we were using was correct, that we weren't just throwing around terms like color, for example, and expecting everybody to understand what we were talking about. Because if you've been blind for your entire life, if somebody says something's blue, it's not going to mean a whole lot to you. So this particular student was really good at making sure we corrected the language that we were using. We included a lot of physical descriptions of why things were the way that they were. And we also used a lot of, I guess, references to common objects that provided, I guess, a bridge in knowledge. So giving people something really familiar to latch onto and then comparing it to something slightly more abstract can be a really, really good way of getting that idea across about size or about shape or about composition or other things like that. Okay. So I also talked about the fact that, so we don't just want to engage with the VR community ourselves, we want to also start to try and change the way that the academic and the research and the public engagement community around the world, and particularly in the UK, do what they do, how they engage with people about science. So we've provided a lot of help. We've offered ourselves as sort of consultants. We've also been sort of asked to help people develop various exhibits and other things like that. We've also done a lot of talks like the one that I'm giving tonight. We've also talked at a lot of conferences about how what we've done is useful, how it works, and why more people should be adopting more versatile approaches to teaching. So we've also got a number of really nice international collaborations on the go at the moment as well. So we're starting to reach beyond the UK. We have groups in America, in South America, in Africa, and back home in Australia as well, who are starting to develop their own resources based on the kinds of ideas that we've talked to them about. So that's really, really reassuring. So here I've got a picture of one of the things we've helped develop. So this is at the Centre for Life in Newcastle. So they wanted to create a more accessible space, and they decided they wanted to make I believe this is something like 1 meter by 4 meter tactile map of the Milky Way. And they've got this sitting on a slope table. The idea there is that if you're in a wheelchair, for example, you can wheel yourself up to this and you can still feel this really easily. You can run your hands across it. But even just looking at this, you can get a really nice sense of what our Milky Way looks like from the Earth, what we see when we look up into the night sky, what we could see if we could see the whole Milky Way at once, sort of lying edge on. So this is a really beautiful example of how this kind of accessible resource can be used in a much more public space, I guess. We've also done a lot of workshops at meetings where we've used our models and our way of describing things, I guess, as an example of how other people can present STEM and astronomy and just science in general. On the left, there's myself and Coleman Kruzek, who's a colleague who actually wrote the code that makes our models. We're talking to a bunch of people in Japan about how our models work, why they're accessible, why they work for everybody, not just people with visual impairments. On the right-hand side is a talk that I really enjoy giving. It's a talk that's really, really hard to see, and I've deliberately made it difficult to see. And I actually use this as a way of, I guess, calling out academics and astronomers on the way that they present their science, the way that they produce plots, when they use tiny text, when they do things like that. And so this is a little bit of a joke presentation, but it's also just a good way of really making people start to think about the way that they present their science, how it can be incredibly inaccessible, but the really, really simple things they can do to make it better for particular audiences like vision impaired people, but also better for just everybody in general. And you may notice that the slides I'm presenting today hopefully are super, super easy to see if you've got any vision at all. I've used a dark background. I've used really, really bright text. I can read these. So hopefully those of you with better vision than me are having even less trouble seeing these. Okay, and lastly, what we're aiming to do, what we started to sort of work on leading up to the outbreak of COVID-19, what we're hoping to continue with when the pandemic is over, is we want to start creating a national network of people who present STEM, so subjects like physics, like maths, like astronomy, like chemistry, to vision impaired people in a more accessible way, or just increasing the accessibility of the kinds of science that they're presenting in general. And so in 2019, we ran 5 presenter training workshops. So these were in locations all across the UK. We had a total of 66 people attend those. And again, we used the Tactile Universe model as an example of how we could present things in a better way. People walked away from those pretty enthusiastic. So obviously York is a really nice example. So University of York has taken one of our Tactile Universe kits. They're doing their own work, engaging the local community with that. And I hope as well that that's influencing some of the other stuff that they're doing as well. To help these groups that we trained, we also sent out 20 resource kits. So our resources are relatively easy to produce. All you need is access to a 3D printer. We've made them free. So to access them, you just go to our Tactile Universe website. You can download them. We've got our lesson plans. We have everything else we've put together. Having said that, though, it takes a long time to 3D print all of these. Not everyone has access to a 3D printer. So we produced a whole set of resources to send out to people as well, because we wanted to make sure, again, that everything was accessible. And yeah, we've made our resources available for free. So we've had a lot of groups all the way from South America up to Canada. Random groups keep popping up on Twitter with our models saying, hey, we've just used these at a local stargazing night, or we wanted to talk about astronomy in a planetarium. We've printed some of your models. So the models are getting out there, and that's really, really nice to see. So we are gradually having an influence on people with the kind of work that we're doing. And this is just a picture from one of the workshops. So this is one that we ran at the Royal Astronomical Society in London. Everybody in this image is really, really engaged. So on the left, bottom left-hand corner, there's a totally blind lady who was actually an actor. So she's involved with a theatre company. She wanted to start thinking of ways that she could make her acting, her stage performances, and her audience engagement more accessible. So she wanted to sort of come along, feel the tactile models, see how 3D printers have improved this kind of thing, and start to think about ways she could implement this kind of stuff in her own work as well. So yeah, these workshops were a lot of fun. This pitch is just really busy. There's a lot of stuff going on. Lots of people feeling models. There's actually a vision impaired student in the top right-hand corner who did a physics degree at York, and he attended these workshops as well. So here are some images of the tactile models that we made. So there's a table full of models. This is sort of, as we were producing them, we just wanted to make sure that everything was okay, that quality was fine. This was a really, really long process, but it was well worth doing, because on the right-hand side, we have a truck full of boxes that have all of our resources in them. And so these are the resource kits that we sent out to people. This had everything from tubs of Play-Doh that can be used to make 3D shapes and other things like that. CDs that can be combined with that Play-Doh to make galaxy images, full sets of our models, beach balls that can be used as a reference compared to, say, something like a peppercorn, so that we can get ideas of scale in our solar system. So in this case, the beach ball would be our sun, peppercorn would be our Earth. We can use that as a really simple way of getting ideas of size across to anybody who's having trouble wrapping their head around that. And to be honest, that can be pretty much anybody. I have trouble wrapping my head around sizes like that. So yeah, being able to send these kits out was really, really helpful. And so our plans for the future, once we can actually start interacting with people properly again, are to hold meetings where we get anybody who's interested in using resources like these, who wants to engage their local vision impaired community, or who wants to make what they're doing a little bit more accessible. We want to get everyone together to share their experiences. We want to hold meetings every 2 months where people can share how their work has been going, any ideas they might have, any challenges they might have had, and just basically get everyone else in the meeting to brainstorm, to think of ideas to work around. Pardon me, to work around those problems and to to think about solutions. So we're really hoping this network's going to grow, that we're going to get a lot of people involved, and that this will start to really influence the way that science communication is handled in the UK and further afield. We also want to provide a shared evaluation framework. So evaluation is something we talk about a lot in public engagement. It basically just means that if stuff's working really well, or if it isn't working really well, we want to be able to know that based on the feedback that people give us. We want to make this as easy for anyone else using our resources to use as possible. So our plan is to put together something that people will just be able to sort of hop onto the internet, enter data into, and we'll be able to look at that and work out how to improve what we're doing and pass that on to the people who are using our resources. And we also want to create things like FAQs and shared best practice guides. So again, there are going to be lots of people having lots of experiences with lots of really diverse groups. We want to make sure that those experiences are recorded and that people aren't making the same mistakes over and over again, but also that people are having the same successes. And so by getting people to sort of share their experiences, to share what's working for them, what isn't working for them, we're hoping that we can basically improve the way that all of this kind of stuff is working for everybody involved. Okay. And so we've just been lucky enough to receive a little bit more funding. Previously, we've worked with galaxies and the solar system. And so these are really interesting topics. They're topics that are pretty dear to my heart because they're the kinds of things that got me into astronomy in the first place. But we also want to start looking at slightly more, I guess, current areas in astrophysics. One of the most current areas in astrophysics is the study of gravitational waves. And most of you probably remember back in 2015 when the first gravitational wave detection was announced. And they played that amazing sort of chirp noise that was the sound that that gravitational wave would have made if we were able to hear it sort of slowed down. And so we're actually going to start looking at ways that we can use a combination of tactile and audio resources to teach people about gravitational wave science, because we think gravitational waves are really, really cool. There's a lot of scope for doing some really, really cool work with sounds and touch and sight. So combining all of those three to get what could otherwise be a pretty difficult to explain, I guess, area of science across to a pretty receptive audience. And in the long run, what we're really hoping is that we're going to see at least a few more vision impaired people getting into physics, getting into STEM, maybe even becoming professional astronomers. That they'll be more confident creating the kinds of work environments that will work for them. That they'll be more confident using things like sound and using things like touch alongside more traditional visual means of representing their data. And yeah, so that's kind of my dream, is that we can work towards that. And hopefully we're going to be able to make a difference with this project. And just lastly, if you want to access any of the Tactile Universe stuff, or if you want to get in touch with us, please feel free to reach out. So our email address is tactileuniverse@gmail.com. You can find out more about the project and download our resources at www.tactileuniverse.org. So there are various links there. We've got guides to the 3D printing side of things as well, because 3D printing can go really, really badly wrong if it's something you've never tried before. But we tried to provide as much in the way of guides as we possibly can. But yeah, that's a good way of getting our resources, of using them. Even if you're fully sighted, I'd recommend maybe printing one of our models if you have access to a 3D printer, because it'll be unlike anything I think that you've ever experienced before. And if you happen to use Twitter and you want to follow us on that, please go to @Tactile Universe. We're trying to be a little bit better about keeping that account running, because obviously with coronavirus, things have slowed down a fair bit, but we're trying to post as much useful information on there for everybody as we possibly can. So thank you so much for listening, and I think we probably have time for questions now.
I certainly have loads of questions, but it looks like I'm going to have to hold off, because there are also lots of loads of nice questions from our audience members. Now, I do apologize in advance. There are lots of really great questions and we might not get through all of them. But I will try to choose a few different questions covering a few different themes from your talk.
Yep.
So the first one I thought might be nice to ask was is actually about the science themselves. So You said that galaxies can be different shapes. Can you say a little bit about why galaxies have different shapes?
Absolutely. And sorry, I did kind of rush through that a little bit. That's bad of me. So galaxies come in lots of different shapes and sizes. The two main shapes that we tend to see in the universe are things that are disky or things that are round. We also see galaxies that are just absolute messes. They look a little bit like clouds. They don't have any real structure at all. But those two main shapes are things that are disky and things that are round. So the disky ones we tend to call spiral galaxies. So if they're young, if they're forming a lot of really new stars, they have these spiral arms, they have a bulge in the middle. That bulge tends to be much redder in color because it has lots of older, cooler stars. The spiral arms tend to be bright blue because they're where most of the new stars in those galaxies are being formed. So they really stand out. They're incredibly bright. Whereas when we look at sort of the more ball-shaped galaxies, we call these elliptical galaxies. They're completely different objects. So these tend to be much older objects. They're usually the result of lots of galaxies combining together to make one really, really big galaxy. The reason they're ball-shaped is because the stars inside them have very different orbits. So in a disk galaxy, in a spiral galaxy like our Milky Way, mostly everything moves around in a flat plane. So I referred to a dinner plate sort of earlier on. You can kind of imagine that all the stars, all the gas, all the dust that make up the spiral galaxies is sort of confined, I guess, into that really, really narrow disk shape. So everything moves around the center in pretty circular orbits. Everything moves around in that really, really confined shape. In an elliptical galaxy, because these have usually been through such a traumatic sort of set of events to make them the shape that they are, galaxies will have come in from all different directions in the merging process. It means that the stars that make up this galaxy, they might have originally been part of a galaxy that was a disk shape and sort of orbiting really nicely. Their orbits will have been messed up because all of these galaxies have come together to form a much bigger galaxy. And so what we actually see is something that looks like a big fuzzy ball. The stars in these galaxies are usually orbiting on really long orbits, so they'll swing in really close to the center and swing back out again, but they're doing that at all different kinds of directions. And because there are hundreds and hundreds of billions of stars in these galaxies, because we have stars orbiting at all different positions in all different directions from that central point, yeah, we get this thing that looks like a big fuzzy ball. Hopefully that's a good enough answer.
I love the big fuzzy ball galaxies. They're definitely my favorite ones. Awesome. So moving along to looking at the tactile models themselves,
Yep.
I've got a question. Curious to know whether sighted people find that the models improve their appreciation of what they're able to see. So does the touch enhance what people can see as well?
That's definitely the feedback that we've gotten. So a lot of people insist on closing their eyes. They feel the models. They, I guess, compare mentally to what they can see. And for a lot of people, the feedback we get is that they'll actually feel features that they couldn't see with their eyes, or that they'll see features that they then can't feel. So things like stars, we realized very quickly were going to, I guess, cause us a little bit of difficulty. So in a telescope image like the ones we've used to make our models, stars are basically these little pinpricks of light. And so that translates to what feels like a pin in our tactile models. So we had to be a little selective in choosing galaxies that didn't have too many stars that were between us and them. So most of the big stars we see in images of galaxies are actually stars that are part of our own galaxy. They just happen to be between us and the galaxy that's much further away that we're trying to look at. And so, yeah, we had to be a little careful about the galaxies we chose just to make sure that they were pretty clear. They weren't too obstructed by stuff in our own galaxy kind of getting in the way. But yeah, in general, the feedback's been really positive from, I guess, vision impaired and fully sighted people. In general, we managed to engage people for a little bit longer. So when we've done this at science festivals, where we've had our galaxies just as a stall to try and snag people to get them to come up and talk to us, we find that people stick around a lot longer if they have something in their hands to distract them while we talk to them. Whereas if we just try to talk to them and show them pretty pictures, they tend to get disinterested pretty quickly and sort of walk away. So there are definitely some advantages. But I think this whole idea of being able to see different things that you can feel really highlights the fact that there's room in science for tactile stuff like this and for audio stuff, because each of these different modes of accessing data will offer its own unique, I guess, pros and cons. So it's really just expanding the way that we can appreciate images like this, but also the way that we can access data and do our science.
That's fantastic. So another question related to the models, a sort of a more technical question. So how can a tactile print demonstrate rotation or speed? So things like blue shift and red shift, showing whether a galaxy is moving towards us or away from us.
So that's something we've been thinking about a little bit. So generally we cheat and we use a model like this. So what I've got in my hands here is a CD. We've used some epoxy putty to basically build up the spiral arm structure, and we've attached some wooden sort of spheres to here to make this. Basically, this is a toy model of a galaxy. What we tend to use this for is if people are having a little bit of trouble interpreting the real data, this can be a simpler way to start off to sort of get an idea of the kinds of shapes we're supposed to be feeling. The really nice thing about this model, though, is we can start to use it to demonstrate ideas like rotation, but also ideas like inclination. So the reason we get so many different shaped galaxies isn't necessarily because these galaxies are vastly different from each other. Sometimes it's because we're looking at them from completely different angles. So if we see a galaxy face on, so it's going to be completely round, versus edge on, it's going to be completely just like a flat line. This makes this object look like two completely different things, whereas it is actually the same galaxy. It's just our perception. The angle that we're viewing this from is completely different. In terms of getting ideas like rotation across, what we probably want to be doing is invoking sound in that case. So we can actually play the sound of something like a rotation curve. So that's a plot that astronomers use that basically samples the velocity all the way from the center of a rotating galaxy to the outside of that rotating galaxy. And it's a plot of that velocity, so the rate with which the galaxy is rotating versus the distance from the center. And normally that will climb really quickly, and then it sort of tapers off and gets lower and lower as we get closer to the edge. So that would be a case where we probably want to invoke yet another way of learning that will actually help people. So either by looking at a plot like that or by listening to a plot like that.
Yeah, you definitely don't want to start throwing galaxies across the room, I guess.
No, that can end really, really badly.
Great. So looking at, I did have a really good question. Where was it? Oh, here we go. Thinking about how you describe the images when you do the supporting documentation that goes along with the Tactile Universe project, did that result in you learning anything new about the galaxies?
Yeah, so for me, I mean, the funny thing is, so being a vision impaired astronomer amongst a mostly sort of sighted community of astronomers, I guess, is kind of hard because the way that I learned to talk about astronomy, the way that I learned to present my astronomy, at least initially, was very much geared towards that community. So I got lazy with my language. I'd say things like, that's a blue galaxy, that's a red galaxy. Whereas actually forcing myself to start thinking about the physics that was making that galaxy blue. So the fact that, so when we talk about galaxies, if a galaxy is blue, it's usually because we're getting the light from really hot, really, really young stars. Whereas if a galaxy is red, we're getting the light from much older, cooler stars. And that confuses people sometimes as well, because obviously when we think about red, we usually think about hot taps. When we think about blue, we think about cool taps. But yeah, just have to take my word for it. It's the other way around when it comes to gases being heated up. But yeah, actually explaining stuff like that. So it's obviously incredibly useful for a visually impaired person because we're invoking a less visual way of describing a physical process. It's also really helpful for everyone else as well, because a lot of the time, if somebody just says, hey, this galaxy is blue, we'll just sit back and we won't ask why, even if we don't know. So actually having the ability to go into a little bit more detail is really good for me as a science communicator. But yeah, it's actually helped me understand things a little bit better. I think for me, the first image we ever printed was that one of Messier 51, which is probably my favorite galaxy, just because it's such a beautiful detailed image. There's just, you've got those lovely sort of feather-like structures in the spiral arms where there's clouds of gas and the new stars forming and everything like that. Plus those beautiful dark sort of dust lanes running through. I'd never quite appreciated that image as much as I did when I was able to touch it for the first time. I got such a better idea of the shape. And for me, that was a really wonderful moment.
I love how that sort of comes full circle. You start with the science, then you move into the outreach and the accessibility, but then it comes back to your own appreciation of the science again. That's a really nice loop. And I think that's going to be a really nice place for us to start to wrap up there. I know there's lots of more questions, and there's some really interesting thoughts and suggestions from the audience, which I think just show the engagement that people have with wanting to make science more accessible. So we'll pass on all those questions and comments to Nic. But just to reiterate, you can contact the Tactile Universe project through the website and the email address that Nic put up before. So I'm going to start off by first of all proposing a vote of thanks in the formal language to Nic. So thank you very much. I hope you can hear all of the virtual applause that I'm sure is going on behind screens all over the world right now. And a few things to wrap up. If you are interested in working with the University of York on outreach projects, then do contact us. We're at Physics Outreach, and you can look at our websites and get in touch with us that way. As Nic said, we are involved in Tactile Universe. We are running sessions to do with the boards and the projects that are workshops. We had a whole lot planned to run from March actually all the way through June, and unfortunately those weren't able to run this year, but when we are back and running, we will be back on the scene there. So do get in touch with us so that we know to reach out to our local community and reach out to Nic as well. If you'd like to see the recording of this lecture, then it's going to be up on the York Ideas YouTube channel. So all you need to do is just go onto YouTube and search for York Ideas. Do give us a couple of days to run it through the chunks and the churns that you have to go through to get all the settings up and running, but then we will be able to watch this lecture again and again. And of course, there are going to be more open lectures. So you can head to york.ac.uk/events to find out all the wonderful public lectures that are going on this term and indeed throughout the rest of the academic year. We do want to hear your thoughts, so you can contact us through the Twitter account. You can use the hashtag #YorkIdeas, or one word, if you want to leave your thoughts about this evening or indeed any of the other public events that we put on. So my final thing is just to really thank everybody for coming. It's been wonderful to have you all along. I'm so motivated personally by the fact that so many people are interested in making science more accessible, and I'm sure Nic is as well. And so from both of us, I really sincerely thank you for being interested in this area. And it just leaves me to wish you a very, very lovely evening. Thank you.